Project Maple Leaf starts now.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Dan with Warpaint JKU. Now this is Project Maple Leaf, okay? But Maple Leaf is a 2007 JKU Rubicon. Right now it has built Dana 44 axles under it and, you know, basic lift kit, short arms, that kind of stuff. Well, we're gonna be totally transforming that Jeep into a 1-ton vehicle on at least a 40-inch tire with a super custom suspension. And stick around for that suspension because it's completely custom. No one makes a kit for it. It's super budget friendly and it's going to give you a ton of flex to the point where I believe we're going to put a real super long travel shock on it. So it's going to be pretty cool, but you're definitely going to want to check it out. But the first part of this build series is going to be what you see right here behind me, the axles. So let's dive on. This obviously is not the axle that we're going to be putting inside of Maple Leaf. This axle is a Dana 30 out of a non-Rubicon JK, and I just have it here to show you guys right next to the Superduty Dana 60 that we chose as a comparison, right? I've done other comparison videos. You can go check those out. I'm not going to go that deep into it here, but just to address the fact that the camera does not ever do it justice, I just want to show you guys really fast that this is the size of the diff, right, in relation to my hand. And remember, I'm a pretty big guy, 6'3", 6'4", I got a big hand, but this is the size of the diff. Check out the size of the diff on the Dana 60, right? I mean, there's just no comparison as far as the size goes. Again, my other videos are going to dive on into that. We're going to talk about the big differences. We're going to talk about how big a tire you can run on those axles. But for this video, we're definitely going to ignore this Dana 30 and we are going to hop right on in to the Super Duty Dana 60. Now, the Super Duty Dana 60 is actually an interesting axle, okay, because it went through a couple of transformations. That's not uncommon, right? I mean, earlier Jeeps with Dana 44s are different than the later Jeeps with Dana 44s. It happens across every auto manufacturer and they typically make them better. And the Super Duty axles are no different. They definitely made them better. We'll get into why in just a minute, but there's a quick little caveat to that, okay? In an effort to make them better, they upgraded them again in the year 2017. And when you look at all the aftermarket Jeep swap companies that make swap trusses and kits, you'll see that they usually break them down into two categories, prior to 05 and then 05 and up. But there's no limit on that and up part, right? You got to be really careful with that because if you happen to have a Super Duty Dana 60 out of a 2019 or something 17 and newer, you're thinking it's a score, right? Pretty new axle, low miles, definitely not beat up. The problem with that axle is gears. At the time I'm making this video right now, no one makes a gear deeper than a 488 for that Super Duty Dana 60 in the year 2017. I've been told that they did something in that axle with the pinion, and the pinion design is a little bit different. But the reason all the aftermarket parts companies still list it as a possibility is because they're selling you trusses, right? And the trusses will fit because the housing is essentially the same, but the gears inside of it will not. A 2016 gear will not fit in a 2017 Super Duty axle. So you can't find gears deep enough for what most of us need in our Jeep. So with that said, this axle is actually going to be out of a 2008 F250 or F350. It doesn't really matter. They're both the same front axle. Now, there's a bunch of reasons why we chose this axle. The aftermarket support is huge. This axle was also in fleet vehicles, right? Fire departments use them, police stations use them, work companies use them. They use them in oil fields, construction companies, all sorts of stuff. So the aftermarket support for an axle like this is huge, and they're pretty easy to find, although they have become a little bit more expensive. So you're gonna have to search for the right deal. However, this axle, right, you can go to any General Auto Parts store and be able to get new hub bearings, brakes, ball joints, things like that. And they're already super strong because these vehicles equipped with these axles are meant to carry a ton of weight and tow a ton of weight. So they're built to last and take that abuse. Your Jeep, although it may be heavy, does not weigh as much as what these axles are rated for. So they're definitely the axle of choice for a JK. Hey guys, just want to take a quick second here to say, if you like what we're doing, you like what we're building, definitely hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, give this video a share, tell your friends about it, get on over, follow me on the Instagram page. I interact with people more easily over there through messages and things like that, because your support is what's making this channel possible. I can bring you guys the content, show you guys how to build stuff on a normal guy budget, right? And in a normal house with normal affordable tools, and we can build some really fun stuff that I can then give away to the subscribers. This vehicle, obviously not gonna be a giveaway. We're not at that point yet, but I'd love to be able to buy someone's old Jeep, old Ford, old Toyota, and make it fun, make it into something cool as a crawler, go show you guys how to build it, make some good content, and then give it back to y'all as a thank you for making the channel what it is. So hit that subscribe. We're gonna start with the end of it, and that it has locking hubs. Now, the locking hub, right, for those of you that don't know, basically lock the rotation of your wheel to the axle shaft. You can unlock those hubs, right? And then your wheel will spin freely and your axle shaft won't. And that means the gears won't, which means your drive shaft won't. So there's a lot of benefits to that. It reduces drag on your engine and transmission, and it gives you some better fuel economy. It's a pretty nice option. And again, there's a bunch of different aftermarket companies that make different locking hubs at different strengths. So definitely a good possibility to upgrade it. Now, moving inward from that hub, okay, we have your axle shaft in here, right, with a U-joint. The older Super Duty axles, right, before 05 had a 35 spline inner shaft, which is a pretty big axle shaft, but the outer spline was only a 30 spline, okay? So you can, if you land an earlier Super Duty axle, convert the outer hub to a 35 spline and convert the outer shaft to a 35 spline, but it's more work when you can maybe just find one a little bit newer. The 35 spline inner, 35 spline outer. This also has a 1480 U-joint in it. And that's a difference between the F450 and 550s, right? Versus the 250s and 350s. Those bigger axles are what are referred to as the Super 60. And those have a 1550 U-joint. But the thing about that is you can actually buy aftermarket axle shafts, and because the C's are the same on those 450s and 550s as they are on the 250s and 350s, you can actually fit, right? The C and the knuckles the same, so you can fit that larger U-joint in there. So all you have to do is get an aftermarket set of axle shafts, or even the upgraded axle shafts for those vehicles, slide them in, and you'd have 1550 U-joints. But 1480s are certainly strong. All right, and moving on in from the axle shafts, we have the diff. There are a ton of locker options for a Dana 60. You can do E-lockers, you can do air lockers, you can even do lunchbox lockers. Some people like to do the lunchbox locker because you can disconnect the hubs like we talked about earlier with the locking hubs and drive it normally. But they're cheaper. They usually don't last as long. So when I say they're cheaper, they're not necessarily a lower quality, but a lot of them are, especially the cheaper lunchbox locker options. And if you're gonna be spending the money on building one of these, spend the extra few $100s and get yourself a true selectable locker. I think you're gonna be a lot happier. That's the route that I would always recommend. However, the ring gear in this is big, right? It's a 9 3/4 ring gear. Some companies make it a 10-inch ring gear. And you can gear this axle, okay, all the way up to a 7/17 gear ratio, right? So while it works in Jeeps, because we don't need 7/17s, right? A 538 is plenty. But it also works in a lot of Toyotas, right? The Toyota crew, especially on the first gens that want to use that older 4-cylinder, that 22R, that's a really popular engine. and they're really reliable, but they don't make any power, right? But you can gear this to a 717 and do 60 miles an hour down the road and actually have the gear ratio to multiply that torque to actually make that less powerful motor turn big tires off-road and have a decent crawler. One of the other benefits that we haven't talked about with the Superduty Dana 60 is the width, okay? This axle is 72 inches wide on wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface, which allows you to mount a larger tire a little bit further out. And the benefit of that with a larger tire, right, is when you're turning your tires, right, steering, they're less likely to hit the frame because they're further away. And when you articulate a larger tire and flex your suspension out, they're a lot less likely to rub things like your inner fenders, things like that, because it's wider. So that's another benefit, right? And beyond that, the really cool thing about this Superduty 60 is from the factory, this has 10 degrees of separation between the pinion and the C's, right? So you can maintain the caster angle that you want, like a factory 6-degree caster angle, while still having the correct drive shaft angles, which is pretty cool. Lots of aftermarket axles for the Jeeps all come with 10 degrees of separation. Even the Ultimate Dana 44 comes with 10 degrees of separation, but that's not something that a factory axle has. The factory axles usually only have 6 degrees. So it's kind of cool that the Super Duty axle, even though it's a factory axle, already has 10. So it's perfect. The aftermarket 1-ton options, right? When you build them from a company and they ship them to you to just have them bolt right into your vehicle, you pay for that, right? This axle is going to be heavier than those axles, all right? Because of the casting and the way they make the differential and things like that, these axles are definitely a couple 100 pounds heavier. But in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, that's a benefit, right? Because having that extra weight under your springs, having unsprung weight, being that wide and that heavy helps lower your center of gravity. So even though you may have this axle on a lifted Jeep on big tires, they get kind of tall pretty quick. You have a really low center of gravity. It makes you a ton more stable. The other benefits to these, right, and going back and talking about the factory parts, is the C's are a lot bigger than your factory Jeep axles. And because of that, the ball joints are also really big. We said earlier in the video that these vehicles are meant to carry a ton of weight. They're meant to haul a ton of weight. So they build them with really big components. And when you put the bigger ball joints and things in these axles, they're fine for running 40-inch tires. You can even go bigger than that. You can buy heavy duty factory kind of option ball joints from companies like Moog, and they make them greasable, and you can just throw a ball joint in there and it's perfectly fine because it's meant to be so heavy duty. All right guys, so there you have it. All right, the Dana 60, why we chose it, the benefits of it. There's a whole host of them. There are some benefits to doing some other aftermarket axles as far as being maybe a little bit nicer as a daily driver because they're a little bit lighter, things like that. But just the aftermarket support, the factory support, and the strength that you're gonna get out of an axle like a Super Duty 60 is pretty awesome. So stay tuned, follow me as I build that axle, as I build the rear, and as I design this awesome, super flexy, super affordable suspension on Project Maple Leaf.